Okay, we are live. Welcome back to the People's Basics, where we come, once again to be able to have one of our Commoners Corner segments where we talk to people like you about what we think the basic role of government should be, as well as what are some of the top issues of our time that we need to be addressing. So today on the program, we're going to be talking to Tricia, and we're going to go through a variety of topics, but I know one of her top issues that we're going to get to talk about at the end of our episode is gun violence, and how do we try to address this problem in America? That being said, my friends, I want to encourage you all to like and share today's episode to be able to help us grow this movement if you enjoy what you're seeing today, and sign up yourself to come on to be able to have a conversation about what your top issues are and what you think the basic responsibility of government is. That being said, let's bring on today's guest, Tricia. Tricia, welcome to the People's Basics. It's a pleasure to be able to have you on the program today.
Hi, thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, Tricia, for the folks out there that might not know you, could you introduce yourself to them, where you're from, what you do, and how you politically identify?
Okay. I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio area, but I've been in the South in Raleigh, North Carolina for a couple decades at least. I identify, I'm a software designer for healthcare, and I identify as a left libertarian. Coming
Very
from,
nice.
I think, I've voted for a lot of Democrats and a lot of local libertarians, basically.
Yeah, we got to talk to Brendan Carpenter yesterday on our
Oh, yeah.
Commoners Corner segment about left libertarianism. We have a lot of overlap with it. And so, I think left libertarianism can have some various degrees of, what we think the basic role of government should be.
Yeah.
And so, Tricia, in your mind, what do you think the responsibility of government is to its people?
Okay. Well, so I do believe in capitalism. Well, I should say actually free markets more than capitalism. But so I think the government is a referee or umpire, setting up an equal playing field. That means playing field for individual citizens who want to become entrepreneurs or want to not participate in markets and do their own thing. So very, very basic protection of our environment, our health and well-being. So just making sure citizens have a solid base from which to function, and some equality with corporations and other powers, not unduly advantaging corporations or bigger powers in society, basically setting everyone up for success and equal opportunity, basically.
No, well, I mean, that largely sounds like a lot of the common values we have here at the network. Our common values beyond advocating universal basic income and services is liberty, justice, and security.
Yeah.
And I think you're largely saying that in that, we have to preserve people's freedoms. We have to make sure that when things are being done in a marketplace, that it's being, there's some arbiter of what is fair within the marketplace and how things are resolved. And then lastly, it's, making sure there's the security of a safe environment for all people in the nation. So I can largely resonate with those things. So I wanted to ask you, in that preservation of, freedom and justice and security, is one of the issues when you were signing up for your segment, is a passion issue for yourself. It's the subject of guns. And so I think guns, frankly, is one of those things that largely touches on each of these. Some people say we need guns because it's a security matter and they want to protect themselves. Some people want to have the freedom to be able to own one themselves without any restriction. And I'd love to ask you, what made guns and gun violence in general such an important topic to you to focus on?
I'm seeing, rhetoric or just opinions that seem to, I don't know, get it wrong, sounds judgmental, but I think are not helping to solve it or come up with pragmatic solutions from kind of both poles of the spectrum. I'm not a gun person. I don't own a gun. I don't want to be around guns. I am a person who has background with, domestic violence. And so yeah, the whole conversation around, you know, um, mass shooters must be mentally ill people kind of misses the mark for me. And the whole conversation around we need to ban certain types of guns misses the mark for me, because I think I can go into, I don't want to blab on, but um, there's a nuance being missed, and the whole, quote unquote mental illness thing that I kind of have from a domestic violence background. And then on the gun, the support of having guns, it's so easy to circumvent any kind of laws that are put into place for certain types of gun or certain types of ammo. I'm not trying to fall back on the conservative, usually conservative view of, hopes and prayers. We can't do anything to solve the problem, so we'll do nothing. There's lots of reforms we could do. I just think, wholesale saying, okay, get rid of all of this type of gun is not addressing the root causes either. So it's just not helping to just argue that back and forth.
Yeah, I do agree with that statement. There's a lot to flesh out there. I think one of the interesting statements is that largely that last point you made of certain weapons being targeted for gun control and being banned, like for instance, assault weapons like an AR-15 is largely what a lot of the conversation in DC is about. But I always feel like that conversation is a bit weird when you think about overall gun violence in America, because yes, it does have some of the bigger headlines, but when it comes to the actual data, it has 20 times less deaths due to these assault rifles compared to handguns.
Right.
You think about the actual issues related to these. A handgun is much more portable and concealable to be able to do harm. It's also easier for people to use in purposeful, violence to self. In suicide, it's more used. It's also much more common to be able to be used in accidents in the home with children, because when you think about the actual types of firearms, the actual trigger for a rifle is a lot harder to be able to fully, actually lock down and fire than a handgun. The trigger has a lot more sensitivity at the handgun level. And so all of these things together makes me feel like we're focusing on the wrong thing. And so I'd love to ask you, which is, I think, part of the right thing, but you gave an interesting dynamic to it, the mental health side. I want to hear, in your opinion, what do you think we're getting wrong in that conversation? Because I think some are mental health, like there are clearly crime can be related to someone having poor mental health. And then some, I think, are unfairly. So how do you think this conversation is going wrong?
Okay, and I wanted to also come back around to the guns for a second. Well, okay, I'll come back. I forgot. So, I think on the, okay, I remembered, but I'll come back. On the mental health side, a lot of us have mental health issues. A lot of us, have anxiety or depression, a lot of conditions, and actually, even people who have like schizophrenia, people with mental health issues are actually more likely to be victims than perpetrators. What we know from the domestic violence or domestic abuse sphere that I think doesn't always, it kind of stays in its place and doesn't come into the broader discussion is you can look more reliably at the 3 R's. Does the person show rage or hate? Does the person show resentment or entitlement towards a group of people? Or and I'm not trying to get into, it could be any group of people, right? It could be their family. So it's not necessarily identity politics type of thing. And rage, resentment, and revenge. Does a person talk about wanting to get back at someone or revenge fantasy? So those 3 R's are really good indicators of someone who's way more likely than the average person with mental health issues to commit one of these acts. And there are indicators all the way from, I know some libertarians won't be super comfortable with this, but using AI, for example, to look at sentiment online and look for clues that someone may need help.
I was going to ask, how do you do the detection? So it's like, obviously screening social media is one way, but I it's like you can only do so much. It's like we're not gonna try and go to the point of violating
No,
privacy to be able to do constant surveillance. But
no.
I do think, like, yeah, if you're freely offering um, thoughts and opinions and information to the public, like social media, that should be
Yeah.
freely ready to be analyzed.
As part of the picture. Yeah, not necessarily to say, okay, thought police, right? You've thought
Yeah,
of this, so we're
exactly.
locking you up. But with other parts of the puzzle, like domestic violence calls that don't result in usually law or any kind of jail sentence, right? So someone
Yeah.
doesn't have a record, so they can still purchase firearms. But you could look at, how many domestic violence calls they've had to their home. And I know that's complicated too, because people falsely report, but actually, that's very small percentage compared to, you can build a picture of, and again, someone, not to punish or shame, but someone who may need some help or some intervention or prevention, and services, which comes back around to, I think, what we were talking about at the beginning of having more of a support system for citizens, and for
Yeah.
their health and well-being, right?
Yeah.
Before any of this starts to snowball.
Yeah, this frankly reminds me of a conversation actually similar to a current Supreme Court case that's currently going on in what's it, Caniglia versus Strom, I think it is. It's basically a case in which an individual had been found to be a potentially high risk threat to the household and potential domestic abuse. They did not have a record. The cops had shown up at the scene trying to respond to an incident,
They can't do much.
and
Yeah.
and they well, in this case, the cops decided while the man was out of the house, they decided because they thought that he was a potential threat that they simply confiscated the weapons that he had in the house because the wife had allowed them in to do that. And so this is now being challenged of whether that was legal based on them not having a warrant. And so this is actually going to be a case where, the Biden administration is urging that people should be allowed to take away those firearms in that instance without a warrant because the officers judged it as a potential imminent threat. How do you feel about that? Do you think we should be able to, like officers confiscate weapons without a warrant?
I wish we had a faster court system where they could have a warrant or red flag laws, right? I believe in red flag laws, but they have to be quick enough to take action. That situation. I'm going to watch this court case because that's eerily similar to something that happened in my life. Very similar. And in that case, the law enforcement officers wouldn't confiscate the guns. They said they couldn't do anything. And so family members were left to put the guns in storage in an unknown location for a while, basically, to keep people out of harm. So right now, like, I'm not super comfortable with law enforcement officers just being able to make that call because of all the issues we have around, the laws aren't exactly enforced equally to different people.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if I can go that far. I think I need some kind of warrant or something from a judge saying, but if it's not quick enough,
That's the thing. It's a balancing act. There's a reason why this is something that has
difficult.
reached the Supreme Court and requires some, judge to opine on.
That'll be interesting.
I wanted to go to one question we actually got from the audience right now related to what we're currently talking about. Kitty asked us, would we not be addressing the suicide aspect of, the gun problem with, mental health coverage expansion and, desperation due to poverty? Like, what are your thoughts? Do you think that we would just be not having a problem with gun suicides if we did these things?
I think it would greatly be reduced. And also, I would guess it would help with gun violence as well. It really would, because, when you're in a pressure cooker because you can't meet your basic needs, we all know that makes families stressed out. And someone that may have those 3 R's, but not quite be there to acting on it yet, might be able to calm down. fit, or that, that kind of person may not get help. And definitely for suicide, because that's really the tragedy of gun availability, right, in our society, is the suicide problem is even worse.
Yeah,
Well, you can't say worse quantitatively.
particularly men often
Yes,
use firearms as their method for
means of
suicide.
suicide. Yeah,
So yeah, it's definitely a particularly big problem. But
yeah.
Katie, thank you for that question.
Mhm.
Tricia, my final question for yourself is, now we've talked about the mental health side of
Yeah,
things, but I don't want to dismiss the need for actual legislation and reform
yeah.
for gun ownership in America.
Oh, yeah.
My personal belief is the two measures that I prioritize is gun licensing programs, as well as smart tech for guns, such as, fingerprint scanners
Mhm.
on firearms. What do you think about the general notion of requiring biometrics for weapon use? This is something that was proposed by a couple candidates on the campaign trail for president, like Andrew Yang. I think even
Mhm.
Beto O'Rourke and several others have thought that we should
Yeah.
have a way where only the person who is registered and has their biometrics registered on the gun should be the one who's allowed to fire it. What do you
Um,
think about that in general?
uh, I would agree with that. I don't think there's any harm to it. I don't know how much it would help with a lot of these domestic abuse or shooter situations, because they usually,
Sure.
but it may help in terms of making the sale of guns and ownership, under the table or registered, less fluid, unless it's easily reprogrammable. I'm not sure how the tech would work. Um, Yeah, and you reminded me, if I can take a second to go back to gun regulations. I think part of the libertarian vibe I'm bringing in right around that is it's so easy. People talk about 3D printing their guns.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, when I look at how we regulate food, for example, like what you can label as organic or free range, there's so much lobbying going on in there that those terms are almost meaningless. It gives me a warm
Yeah.
fuzzy as a consumer, but it doesn't. It helps a little bit, but it's not actually. I still have to do a lot of homework.
Yeah, I get
And
what you
I
mean.
feel like that's a parallel, maybe, that is not as divisive as talking about guns, but I feel the same kind of regulations would happen around guns. It's just too easy for a bunch of lawyers who are legislators to create loopholes for their special interests. So doesn't mean don't do anything. I think, yeah, the fingerprinting and the registration are totally common sense, seem like common sense reforms.
Yeah, I think that they can do a big job. It's not going to solve the entire problem, but I think about those accident cases in the
Yeah,
home. I
kids.
think about also the fact that when you think about burglaries, one of the
Yes.
top items that people look to target is
Mhm.
firearms.
Yeah,
And so having some biometrics on it,
totally.
yes, it's not going to make it necessarily foolproof. You can disassemble a firearm
Mhm.
and try and remove that aspect to it,
Yeah.
but it deeply inconveniences it and makes it a less
Mhm.
desirable thing to do.
Totally.
Um, so, Tricia, we're approaching the end of
Yeah.
our time. And so I wanted to ask you if you had any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the People's Basics audience, or do as we offer every person here, the opportunity to turn the tables on me. Do you have any questions for myself?
Oh, um, not off the top of my head. I do appreciate, though, your program and opinions, and that you surface, and the discussions, because I feel like yeah, you bring up very pragmatic discussions versus a lot of the rhetorical, heated kind of conversations that podcasters go towards. So I appreciate that. I don't know if you have any comments on that, or if that's part of your philosophy. Or
Oh, it certainly is.
yeah,
What we try to center on here at the People's Basics is really three things: positivity. We
yeah,
think there's way too much negativity in the media already. We don't
yeah,
need to contribute more to that. Two is substantive. We
yeah,
actually want to talk about real issues and not just surface level tabloid type stuff.
yeah,
And then three, we want to be pragmatic about it and hear a variety of different perspectives, because we think we have good ideas, but we know that they can be even better from hearing from other people and other perspectives. And
hmm,
so pragmatism is, constantly trying to move the ball in the right direction. Sometimes that's not the full thing that you get, but it's being open-minded and it's listening to the data. And that's what we're trying to do We clearly have a philosophy of establishing the universal basics for everyone.
Yeah.
But we know there might be a lot of ways of how do you actually achieve that. So
Yeah.
we really do appreciate getting to have, really substantive and important conversations with you all. So Tricia, thank you for coming on the program today to be able to talk with us.
Oh, thanks, John. Have a good one.
You're very welcome. Okay, everyone. So that was Tricia, Garrett, and we had our lovely conversation about what the basic role of responsibility of government is in our kind of left libertarian philosophy, as well as a general conversation about how do we start addressing gun violence in America, from mental health to common sense regulation. So we were really appreciative of being able to have her on today. We want to encourage you all, if you liked today's episode, to make sure you hit the like button, subscribe so that you're always informed when a new video is coming out, and sign up yourself to come onto the program to be able to have a conversation about your top issues. That being said, my friends, I hope you have a great rest of your day out there. It's going to be a lovely day, I think, frankly, because we're finally getting vaccines open for us. So I'm excited about being able to finally go get one. But that being said, everyone, I hope you guys have a great day out there. And as always, I hope you stay basic out there.